Hi, everybody. So my name's Lynne Ingram. I'm from Somerset Beekeepers, and I'm the Asian Hornet Teams coordinator for Somerset. So today I'm going to be talking about Asian Hornet teams, everything from setting up the teams, looking at the knowledge required for team members, training, various protocols, etc., as well as looking at the role of the Asian Hornet teams. And that will include some practical skills like tracking, which I'll be covering at the end. So just a little bit of background. We all know that the first Asian hornet in Europe was spotted in France in 2004. And if we look at this slide, we can see that each jump, if you like, represents 1 year of spread across Europe. Now, this slide goes on to 2022. And so it doesn't include, of course, any of this year's sightings. But when that map 23 map is done, it will, of course, include loads more hornets in Britain because so many have been sighted this year. But when we look at this, we can see how effective they are at spreading really, really rapidly. And because of that, it means that we really need to be very much on top of being able, as best we can, to try and prevent the spread, or if they're already established here, which it looks like they might be, to actually try and slow it and not prevent it getting as bad as it actually was in Europe. So moving on from that slide, I want to tell you about our teams in Somerset. So we set our teams up in 2018. Now, Somerset's a really huge county, and as a beekeeping association, we have 12 divisions or teams. And so we decided that what we would do would be to base our Asian Hornet teams with each branch or division. So that means that we've actually got 12 teams in Somerset. Each of those has a team leader, and we try and get about 6 people as team members for each team. Some teams have got more than that. Some have just about got 6. Some are finding it more difficult to recruit. But that's what we're aiming for in terms of a team. And then there's the overall county coordinators. That's myself. And my role is to coordinate the teams, to receive information from the MBU or BBKA and cascade that down to my team leaders, who then in turn cascade it down to their team members. So, for example, we have a number of WhatsApp groups. So if I receive information, I can instantly get that out to all my team leaders, and they can almost as quickly cascade that out to their members. And so we've got a very quick and efficient way of communicating with each other. When we were setting the teams up, we were really grateful that our beekeeping association was able to offer us some financial backing. So they had some reserves themselves, and they had some sponsorship specifically for the Asian Hornets. And so that allowed us to equip all the Asian Hornet teams with the stuff required for the tasks they were going to do. And I'll talk about that a bit later, as well as making sure that all the beekeepers in Somerset were supplied with a monitoring trap, some little sponges to go into the bottom to absorb the bait, and some bait. They also received some publicity materials, some ID things, plus some ID things, plus some little business cards that we have. And those are to go under the roof of your hive. They've got contact details, where to report a hornet, as well as a picture of a life-size hornet on it, so that you can quickly have that in your pocket or under your hive lid and look and see if you can identify an insect that might be near your hive. The other thing about Somerset Beekeepers is that we were able to have presence on their website, which is constantly updated. And very valuably, the press officer for Somerset Beekeepers was able to help with press releases, so that we often have a presence within the local newspapers, on local radio, and TV as well. So that's been really valuable. So just thinking of our teams, so in terms of the roles of the teams, obviously we always think about tracking and actually looking for hornets, but so one of the really important roles of the Asian Hornet teams is to engage and educate various different groups. So obviously the first one is beekeepers. We want all beekeepers to know how to be able to identify a hornet, where to report it, how to monitor it for it, and when. So that's part of our role. We also feel part of our role is to engage and educate the public, with other organizations that might be out there working outside, and other Asian Hornet teams. And of course, it goes without saying that we continue to engage with the BBKA and the National Bee Unit. In terms of the knowledge required to be an Asian Hornet team member, we feel there's a number of different things. We feel it's important that they know about hornets themselves, so how to identify them, their life cycle, behavior, etc., how to report them, how to monitor for them appropriately, and how to track them. And I'm going to look at all of these in a little bit more detail now. So if you're trying to gain this knowledge, how do you actually go about that? Well, one of the very best places to do that is to go over to Jersey. As I'm sure you all know, Jersey have a huge problem with hornets out there, despite their very best efforts. And this year alone, they have almost 200 nests, which is higher than before. And they're working constantly to try and keep track of them, to try and track hornets destroying nests. So if you do go out there, you can serve your apprenticeship there while actually helping them with their battle against the hornets. You can contact the Asian Hornet Coordinator in Jersey, or if you are interested in going, then do get back to me and I'll send you some information. Other ways of getting your knowledge and experiences to attend various training days. So in Somerset, we put on training days specifically for our team members that include a mix of theory and practical skills. And we also ran a Southwest conference come training day. That was in 2020, then COVID sort of caught up with us. Our next one is in 2024 on the 13th of January. Of course, the BBKA run various things, and they have usually an annual Asian Hornet conference. And each year they have the Asian Hornet Week, and that's coming up pretty shortly. And you'll find there's all sorts of information on there, videos, presentations to watch, etc. So one thing I do want to stress is that on the BBK website, there's an Asian Hornet team training exercise. Now, this is an absolute requirement for anyone who's going to be an Asian Hornet team member, because it's required by the insurance company that insure us all. So if you are a team member, you do need to do that in order to be covered by insurance. However, even though it's called a training exercise, it's not adequate training on its own to be an Asian Hornet team member. You do need to do additional training. So just to stress that, anyone can do that exercise, but it doesn't mean that you are adequately trained to be an Asian Hornet team member. You do need more. So these are just some photos of various training things, so actual theory presentations, practical things looking at traps, and these are some of our members out there in the field. So as I said earlier, one of the important things for all team members to be able to do is to identify the Asian Hornet, or more accurately, the yellow-legged Asian Hornet, Vespa velutina. You can see it's primarily a black insect with those yellow socks, a totally black thorax with no markings. The abdomen has that broad orange yellow band towards the base of the abdomen, and a thin yellowy band towards the top. And its head is black, its antennae are black, but its face is orange. And so it's very, very, there isn't anything else really that looks like it. Once you've seen one, then you will recognize it. The thing that it often gets confused, other insects get confused for Asian hornets, So one of the most common is our native European hornet, Vespa crabro. But when you see the two of them together like this, you can see they don't look anything like each other. But our native hornet is large. It makes a loud buzzing noise as it flies past. But you can see in terms of colouring, they're totally different. I think one of the key distinguishing features of the European hornet is that yellow headband. You can see the head is totally different. And in Somerset, we have some hornets, some European hornets, which are melanistic, so their bodies are really quite dark, almost black. But that yellow headband is always there as a distinguishing feature. But you can see with the normal European hornet, you have that brick red thorax, brown legs, and the yellow, really quite waspy markings on the abdomen. Another insect frequently mistakenly identified, this is the hornet mimic hoverfly. Very handsome insect, and you can see a great mimic of our native European hornet. At first glance, it can be mistaken for a European hornet, but if you look at that yellow headband on the European hornet and the yellow markings on the head of the hornet, of the hoverfly, you'll see that the hoverfly has the yellow going down between its eyes rather than a headband. There's other features that make it very different. It doesn't have that sort of same wasp waist that the hornets have, and it has 2 wings rather than 4, but you might not see that as it flies by. And of course, its legs are brown. So another insect is the median wasp. It has got yellow legs, but you can see that all of the legs are yellow right the way up, whereas with the yellow-legged hornet, it's the socks. The median wasp does have a black thorax, but it also has yellow markings on it. And the abdomen is more wasp-like in terms of its patterning, and it's that pale yellow with quite a lot of markings there. The final insect I'm going to show is this giant wood wasp. The colouring is about right, apart from the antennae are yellow, but you can see the body shape is totally different. Now, people often think this is a hornet because they'll say, I've seen it sting. And what you can see there, of course, is not a sting, but the ovipositor, which it uses to lay eggs into soft wood. And so these are just a few of the various insects that the public, especially, may bring to Asian hornet team members for identification, thinking that possibly they've seen an Asian hornet. We do have some template letters and various ID sheets that our members send out to members of the public who make inquiries. So I said that the Asian hornet team members need to be able to know about the hornet, know about its life cycle, its behavior, so that they can explain that to anybody they're engaging with. And we know that like many of the wasps and bumblebees too, it's only the queen that overwinters. And she'll be overwintering in a quiet, secure little spot. And she won't emerge until perhaps March, perhaps when the temperature is about 13 degrees C consistently. And when she does emerge, she'll feed herself to build up her reserves again. And then what she'll do is migrate. And she can fly really long distances in one day, which is partly why they are so good at spreading very widely across the country and across the landscape. Once she's found, settled somewhere after she's flown, she will set up a little primary nest, and that'll be quite low down in somewhere warm, somewhere sheltered and safe. And she'll start building the nest, laying some eggs, but it's just her, of course, laying eggs, feeding the larvae when they hatch, collecting food, but laying more eggs, etc., etc. And so the first eggs will take possibly up to 2 months or something before they emerge, because there's only her to keep them warm. She's only her to feed them and to do everything. But once those first workers emerge, they will then take over many of the duties of the queen, leaving her to be a bit of an egg-laying machine in the nest. And so the nest starts growing quite quickly, and there may come a time when this colony outgrows that nest, in which case they will then set up a secondary nest, and these secondary nests are often the ones that are high up in trees. And what will happen is they'll set up a nest, the queen will go up there, and that nest can grow really quite large because there's lots of hornets there to build the nest and to feed the larvae and to gather forage. But the original primary nest is still there, and the eggs that the queen laid just before she left will need to turn into larvae, be fed, and emerge as adults. And so what you can get is both the primary and the secondary nest still fully active for several weeks, running alongside each other. It's in this time of year, really, when the worker hornets, they've got so many mouths to feed, they will become much more visible when they're seeking for food around and about in the area. But it's in the autumn that the queen starts laying eggs that become the males or the new queens. And both of these will, the males are first a couple of weeks before the queens, and they'll stay in the nest, building up their reserves before they go out. When they have mated, it is the queen who she'll mate, and then she'll go and find somewhere to overwinter. And that'll be within about 1 kilometre of the nest. And the rest of the colony, the males, all the workers, will eventually die out. But the nest can be active until about November, December. And so then the whole cycle starts again, with that queen overwintering and emerging in the spring. So one of the things that we want people to know about is their behavior. And of course, what the hornets are doing when they're hunting for food and when we're seeing them around is they're looking for protein to feed to the larvae. And they will catch an insect, whatever it might be. Here it's a honeybee, and they will dissect it so that they're really going for those big muscles in the thorax, those flight muscles, and they'll make it into a sort of protein ball that they're going to carry back to the nest to their larvae. And here we have some footage that I took in Jersey of a hornet, and you can see that it's removed all the flight muscles from the thorax of that wasp and using its mandibles and front legs to make a protein ball that it's going to carry back to its young. And in turn, the adult hornets receive a sweet, sticky substance from the older larvae, and that is their sustenance. They cannot eat solid food. It's the same as wasps. So it's when there aren't any more larvae, when the queen has stopped laying, that they start becoming a bit of a nuisance. Round sweet things, picnic tables, etc. So one of the other things we want team members to know about are the nests, because these are something that can be looked out for quite early in the year. And they're very beautiful little nests. They can be very small, but they can be in porches, sheds, bramble patches, somewhere low down and safe, because it's only the queen trying to do all the jobs in the nest. Later in the year, this time of year, the nests are a lot bigger. They can be up to 1 metre from top to bottom. The entrance of the nests in the primary nests are at the bottom, and the entrances of the secondary nests tend to be on the side. And you can see here these what look like porches, and what this is where the hornets are trying to enlarge the nest. So in order to do that, they have to remove material from the inside of the nest and reapply it on the outside. And that makes the space inside bigger so that they can enlarge those horizontal plates where the eggs are laid and where the brood is hatching. One of the things that I didn't say is that on their own, the hornets aren't usually aggressive unless they feel threatened. But if you accidentally get anywhere near a hornet's nest, they will defend it extremely vigorously and persistently. And this is the concern, is that with the spread of hornets around the UK, that any member of the public, anybody at all, could inadvertently find themselves in contact with a hornet's nest. And these are just a few of the places you might find them. These are photos from Jersey. So this is in a very high tree, accessible only by a cherry picker or maybe some sort of tree climber. This is just in someone's compost bin, in a cave right by the edge of a beach where families go. In a bramble patch, that's so common and very easy to inadvert, without knowing, be trimming a bramble patch and suddenly find there's an Asian hornet's nest in there. It can be in houses. So this house in St. Helier in Jersey, the members, the householders opened their windows because it was a lovely sunny day, only to find hornets flying into their house. And then it was discovered that there was a hornet nest under the eaves of the house. And then this final photo here is a hornet's nest under the ground. And that's quite common. It'll be in a sort of mouse hole or something, or rabbit hole. And of course, the danger there is anybody at all could accidentally step on it, or the ground might vibrate as they walk nearby, and suddenly you've got lots of hornets. And so it's absolutely crucial that we do really try and make sure that we can find all those nests and have them removed. Of course, all nest removal has to be done by the MBU, the staff that work for the MBU that are specially trained to do that. If you do see an Asian hornet or a member of the public, this is how you report it. Firstly, the best thing is to get some evidence. Those sort of reports that say, I saw an insect fly by, I think it's an Asian hornet, aren't really that helpful. So take a photo, or if you can't do that, because to be fair, it's quite hard to follow an insect around with a camera, take a video and we can take some stills off of that. If it's safe to do so, depending on where you are, where you've come across it, catch it in a pot or a jar or something, if it's safe to do that. If you can't get any evidence and you're not sure what to do, contact your local Asian hornet team. That's what we are there for, to help and advise members of the public. And of course, any reporting needs to be done through the Asian Hornet Watch or through this email address to the alertnonnative@ceh.ac.uk, or just contact your bee inspectors directly and they will be able to help you. So one of the things I talked about was monitoring for hornets, and it's really important that what we're doing is monitoring, not killing. So this is a really shocking sight where you see a hornet trap absolutely full. In this case, it probably is actually Asian hornets, but research has been done and somebody analysed the kill in one of those traps and found that it had caught 3 Asian hornets, but loads of European hornets, bees, wasps, butterflies, crickets, millions of flies. So lots and lots of things. We already have a massive decline in our pollinators. We don't want to add to the problem. So it's really important that any traps we put out are for monitoring purposes and are not going to end up killing 10 ton of other insects. Of course, if you're tracking, you can use an open bait station, and that's different. So there's different ways of doing that. So this is one of those same traps, but it's been adapted. Instead of filling it with a liquid bait, what you do is you get a small pot and you pierce a hole in the lid, use J-cloth or something as a wick, and put your bait in the small pot, and then the small pot goes inside the trap. That way, the aroma, the scent of the bait still fills the pot and will attract insects in. They're not going to drown, but they can get sustenance by sucking from the actual wick itself. And you can see too on that particular one that some holes have been drilled in the flutes so that very small insects can get out themselves. But these monitoring traps do need monitoring daily. And when you're putting traps up, you need to think about where you put them and whether you're actually going to be there. So Obviously, this time of year, sometimes the advice is put a trap up in your apiary. But if you've got an apiary that's miles away that you're only going to be monitoring once a week, obviously, if you did go back and see there was an Asian hornet, that'd be useful. But meanwhile, in that week, a whole bunch of other things might have died. So you do need to think carefully about where you place it. It could be that you place it by your kitchen window. And this trap is been filled with scrunched up kitchen paper with some bait on it again. So whatever goes in there isn't going to drown. And here is one of those traps. It's got some holes in it, and it's got a little pot with some wick. And thinking about the time of year, you might monitor in the spring because we've got queens on the wing. Well, we hope we haven't got them in this country, but we probably have. So you might monitor in the spring. And again, even more important that we're not filling that thing with liquid because lots of European hornet queens will die as well, and other things that are on the wing in the spring, other queens that are on the wing in the spring. And then we might monitor then more at this time of year, and obviously a little bit earlier, because you then got the workers out there. And then the other thing that the knowledge we require team members to have is how to track. And this is just a bait station in Jersey. But I'm going to talk about that again in a little bit more detail in a minute. I talked about the equipment that funding from Somerset Beekeepers allowed us to get for each team. And the idea was to have a kit box like this that contained everything that they needed. So in the event of needing to go out to deal with something, you literally would pick up your kit box, actually, and your yellow bucket, depending on what you were doing, and you'd have everything in there. So it's got all sorts of equipment in there, as well as various leaflets and things. This leaflet is, this is a laminated sheet that you just saw earlier on under the bait station. And what this is doing is just information, and you'd have to fill your own information in. That would be put under your bait station if you were going to be going off, perhaps to just place a new bait station a bit further on. And it's got contact details. It says says what we're doing, trying to find hornets. It also says if you think you've seen any anywhere else, let us know. So that would be in our kit box. But here's a sort of more detailed look at what's inside. So you can see we have the actual box itself. We then have these flower pot saucers, but you can use any sort of container, Tupperware container or something. We have a little bottle with bait in, and it's labeled because it does look a bit like Ribena. So you need to say what it is, that it's a wasp attractant, etc. Unless you're using a bottle that's already labeled. There's notepads. There's various things like these business cards and some of the information sheets that we already have. We've got here a compass, a little pot for collecting things, some marking pens, one of these non-native species, or, there'll be a few of everything, non-native species leaflets. Oh, this is an information sheet on etiquette for tracking and some actual monitoring information. And this is an information sheet about attaching feathers to hornets, because sometimes when you're monitoring them, you can't see them. And somebody, by a dark tree. So somebody had this idea of actually attaching feathers to them to make them more visible. And the other thing that comes with all of this is your yellow bucket. And that's something that you stand your bait station on so that it's very visible, so that nobody's going to accidentally tread in it or something. And that's visible for the trackers, for the hornets, and for anybody else who's coming by. I forgot to say we put in a compass and a timer, but I am aware that many people have those on their mobile phones now, but not everybody does. And also a notepad, but you might prefer to have a clipboard with some sheets. And there's a pen or pencil. I think it's a waterproof one, just in case it rains. So this is the kit that everybody gets issued with, and it sort of gets a bit updated every now and again, but with the idea that you simply can pick it up and walk out the door and you've got what you need in there. And this is the ideal book for every team to have. Written by Sarah Bunker, who's an entomologist, but who's a beekeeper and has been working out in Jersey as well. And it's got lots of information about the hornet itself, its life cycle. It's all based in research, but it's got lots of really, really useful information on tracking. So I definitely recommend that. I talked about engaging with beekeepers, and in Somerset, every beekeeper, every one of our members got issued with a monitoring trap, some little sponges so that it wasn't going to drown anything, and some bait, as well as various information leaflets and those little business cards. And then, as I said, we do various training exercises, but also every branch or division got an hour-long presentation about Asian hornets. So hopefully all our members were well informed about what they were and how to identify them. Included a little identification quiz as well. We have a quarterly newsletter, and so there's always something in there about Asian hornets, which will differ depending on what time of year we're at. I talked about the traps, and I also talked about the conference that we ran in 2020, and that was our next one coming up in 2024. This is some of the information. So here we have this A5 leaflet, double-sided, that everyone got. We also use this on our displays. It's got a life-size Asian hornet picture, various things to compare it with, and lots of information on who to report it to. And this is a business card that everyone got. And these are available for download on our Somerset Beekeepers website. So we also talk to our beekeepers about protecting their bees. In Somerset, we are not needing as yet to live with hornets, but that time I'm sure will actually come. And so there's a few things you can do that are really easy, like letting the grass grow long in front of your hives. So the hornets often quarter the ground in search of bees that are coming in, or what they'll do is hang around underneath the hives and then sort of dart out when a bee comes in laden with nectar. And so just by letting the grass grow around, it makes it much harder for the hornets to do that. And the other thing you can do is put a skirt on your hives. So that can take any form. So here it's just a piece of cloth that's been pinned on, could be anything. But what it does is stop the hornets from hiding underneath your hive stands and darting out to get the bees. Some of the people in Jersey and in Europe use these muzzles. It's a bit like a sort of conservatory, if you like, for bees. It gives them much more space to hang out in. It sort of keeps the hornet at a bit more of a distance. The spacing of these wire, it's like a garden wire that you can get, means that if the hornet goes through with its wings outstretched, it would touch it. And they don't really like that, and so they tend not to go through. And yet a bee can just continue flying and get through without any danger. And it just gives them a bit more space and seems to help a bit. Protect your bees. If you've got fallen apples, that will attract hornets. So I'd move them away from your hives so that the hornets are attracted away from the entrance of your hives. And there's all sorts of different things. There's lots of research going on into all sorts of things, pheromones. There's various traps, there's rackets that you can just hit them with. There's various repellents that may or may not work, but there's lots of stuff going on. And as we come to a point where we're going to have to live with hornets, then lots more information about all these will come out. So one of the other things that we do a lot of is engaging with the public. Asian hornets are not only a beekeeper's problem, they're a problem. If they are here like they are in Europe, they will be a problem for everybody. And so we have an Asian Hornet Roadshow that we take out and about. So this is one at an agricultural show that's a 3-day show that has thousands and thousands of people. You can see we have this suite of banners along the back with various different aspects of Asian hornets, life cycle, comparing it to Europeans, things about nests. We also have information for beekeepers in terms of protecting their hive. So we have a hive set up with a muzzle on it. We have a skirt in front. We have long grass around it and plants. And we also have this display of plants. These are all plants that we know that Asian hornets will go onto either to get nectar or to prey on other insects that are on it. On our table, we have lots of these handouts that I've already told you about. Here we have a video running, and we have displays of things like traps, pinned insects, wasp nests, various things so we can do comparisons, books. And we find we're incredibly busy whenever, you know, people are fascinated, and many of them will tell us how they've seen an Asian hornet and show us then a picture, say, of a European hornet. The other thing we do is we have an area where children can do colouring, and there's a picture of an Asian hornet. And firstly, children are amazingly observant, and we give them lots of stuff that they can take to their teacher in school, put up in school. But the other thing about the children standing there colouring is that the parents are there for ages, and you can then have a much longer conversation with the parents about Asian hornets. And again, this colouring sheet and the stickers that we give out to the children who've coloured it in are all free to download from our website. So I talked about engaging with other organisations. As I said, it's, you know, Asian hornets aren't just a beekeeper problem. There's loads of organisations where their staff are out and about working in the countryside or all over the place. So electricity board, water boards, police force who often have rural crime units, the wildlife trusts that have sort of reserves everywhere, things like the parish councils that might eventually end up, you know, with responsibility for these. And so it's really important that we engage with them, and we'll do that in different ways, through engaging with their ecologists, through giving presentations, through giving them information and publicity. And we've been really very pleased with the result of that engagement that we've had. And most of them are really keen. Most of them aren't even very knowledgeable, but they are very keen to, when they hear about it, to be able to give that information out to their staff. And also things like the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, Butterfly Conservation, they have people who do these monthly walks surveying for butterflies or bees. And so they're in a perfect spot. They have loads of volunteers who do that all over the country, and they're perfectly placed to spot other insects while they're doing that. And whilst the MBU have contacted many of these people at head office level, I think it's really important for all the AHATs to contact their local representatives, because that message may not have come down from head office to the local branches. And engaging with other AHATs. So this is Somerset here in the southwest. Obviously, we're surrounded by other counties. But just getting together we found it to be really useful. That enables us to share knowledge, to share best practice, share resources, but also bulk buy. So we've done 2 or 3 bulk purchases of either Trapit or Suterra or the actual monitoring traps. And that means that we're getting a much better price for everybody. And of course, our conference and training day was for the whole of the Southwest. I haven't mentioned in organisations or the Southwest thing the role of the MBU, the bee inspectors and the BBK, but of course they are people that we are constantly engaged with in various different ways around the Asian hornet. So this is our last conference, and what we wanted to do was to increase the skills and the knowledge of the AHAT members, and to enable us all to work closely together and share good practice. So it was a really full day. We had 4 presentations on sort of science, the life cycle. We had 10 workshops. They were practical things that included tracking and use of maps, traps, etc., discussion groups, panel discussion, and displays all over the place. But it was a really really great day, and we're really hoping that the next one we do in January next year will be as successful. And here's just a few photos from that day. So practical skills. So when we think of the Asian Hornet teams, often this is the main thing that we're thinking about. We're thinking about tracking, and so I'm going to talk about that. So the key thing to start with is that dealing with nests is not any part of the role of an Asian Hornet team. Nests if any nests were ever discovered, they would need to be reported to and removed by the MBU, who have properly trained staff who deal with that sort of thing. As I say, Asian Hornets can defend the nest extremely vigorously, and it's best left to specialists to deal with the nests. When we're out there tracking, we need to work in pairs. Lone working's not a good idea. 2 or possibly 3 people. And there's various bits of equipment that you need. I've already talked about some, obviously a compass and a timer, or you might have that on your phone, a notepad, a clipboard, pen. Some people like to have a physical map that they can draw things on of the area, or other people prefer to record everything on their phone. Binoculars can be useful if you're either looking for nests or actually following hornets. And then you need all the stuff for the bait station itself. So you need some sort of container, which could be that flower pot saucer, kitchen paper, your bait, which is the best really is to tear it or trap it, and a few stones. As I said earlier, the hornets don't like getting all wet and sticky. If they do, they'll spend ages grooming. And so then your whole operation will slow down. And then a yellow bucket, your famous yellow bucket, or a stand, something to put it on. And if you're going to be out there in, hot sunshine, it's going to depend on where you are. You might want to think about, everything like suntan, lotion to protect your skin, drinks. You may even want to take chairs out. It's going to depend exactly on the situation. So these are the basic things. You need to add other things that will make you comfortable. So, as I said, you've got your, this is your basic bait station, and you can see here the crumpled tissue paper, kitchen paper stuff, quite a good stone. You can see there's lots of wasps on this one, leaning, standing on the stone and leaning down to drink, and the others actually sucking from the paper itself. So they're not getting coated in the bait. So they're not going to go off and spend ages grooming. And then you've got your laminated sheet underneath. So you're going to set your base station up near where hornets have been reported or where they've been seen. And you're going to put it on some sort of stand or bucket. There's not always a convenient wall to use. 2 people I mentioned before. So first you wait for your hornets to arrive. Often that's not going to take any time at all. It simply depends on the situation. And the whole aim of this, if we're tracking hornets, what we're trying to do is to basically follow the hornets until we find where the nest is. As I said, we're not going to be dealing with a nest, but we need to know where it is. The only way you're going to be able to do that, because you want to find out which direction they're going and how long they're taking, is to mark the hornets. You could get tons of hornets on one bait station and you're never going to be able to distinguish them. And so what you have to do is mark the hornets on the thorax while they're feeding on your bait station, because they'll often be there for really quite a long time. Now, what I have to say at this point is that in Jersey, they will use a queen marking cage, put the hornet in and use that. But in Britain, we have a law that says you are not allowed to release a captured hornet because it's a non-native invasive species. So the law says we're not allowed to release a hornet that's already been captured. They don't have that law in Jersey, so they can do it. So for us to make sure we stay on the right side of the law, we need to make sure we can mark hornets on the thorax while they're feeding on the bait station. And you can practice doing, and have a practice in your garden with European hornets or wasps or something or other. You just need to make sure that your pen is well shaken first, so you're not needing to do a massive press on the insect. You want to make sure there's plenty of ink there, and then just do a little gentle touch, and that's all that's needed. It'll dry naturally, and then the thing will fly off and you'll be able to start monitoring it. So the two things you're monitoring really are the direction of flight. It's going to fly off towards the nest. Now, once it gets used to your bait station being there, it'll develop, there'll be a much more direct route, which means that your timings will get a little bit quicker. So you can record that using your compass or your phone. And the other thing is timing. And so what you want to do is to time from the moment your hornet lifts off to the moment it comes back. I didn't say that if there's two of you working, have a hornet each, mark them with different colors. And then you can both monitor and just see if they're heading in the same direction, if the timing's about right. The timing, the reason you're timing is because it allows you to estimate how far away the nest is. So roughly it's about 100 meters per minute, but that is rough. The terrain is going to be different, but it gives you a guideline as to whether you're nearly on top of it or if it's quite a way away. And hornets have a foraging range of about 800 meters. And you don't need to be there all day doing hundreds of measurements. You only need, I'm saying 3, it might not be 3. It's going to depend on the weather and things, but you only need a few measurements to establish the distance. You just need to make sure that they're always going roughly the same way, and the timing. I wouldn't take it from the first one because you've just marked it. You've got a new bait station. You need to let it settle down into that direct route to the nest. Here's a couple of bait stations, and you can see you could end up with half a dozen hornets or one hornet and hundreds of wasps. And actually watching their behavior in relation to wasps is astonishing. Sometimes they'll eat them, sometimes they're shooing them off. Sometimes they seem to be quite happy to share their food with them. So this is just one of those timers and a compass. And here's some of our members actually out in Jersey. So you've got someone here monitoring this particular bait station, people with clipboards and timers actually. So having, a couple of you or 2 or 3 of you really helps. And you can see here this team have actually got themselves well organized with chairs and all sorts of things. So in case they get, I don't know how long they were there. But once you've established the direction and the time, then you can start moving. So map your flight paths. Again, everyone's going to be different. Use something on your phone or use a physical thing. Do what suits you. But then what you're going to do is you're going to move your bait stations along the flight path towards the nest. So that might be, depending on how far away you think it is, that might be quite some distance, 50 yards or, depends on the terrain, and it depends the distance that's showing. But your general aim is to move towards the nest in sort of fairly big jumps. And then when you set up your new bait station, you remove your original one. And then the idea is that the hornets flying along there will find your second bait station, and you'll start doing your timings and your measurements from there. And you just repeat that process. You also will do what we call triangulation. So say you're heading along a particular flight path, you might then set up 100 yards away or so to the left or right of your original path. And what you will hope is that the flight path from the one to the side will intersect with the one you're on to give you much more detailed knowledge of where that nest is. And in the same way, you would also set up a bait station that's beyond where you think the nest is. And again, you do that as you find yourself getting closer to the nest. I don't mean right on top of it. You could then put a bait station quite some distance away, and you should see hornets flying back to the nest. And again, all those flight paths will intersect to give you a clue, an indication of where that nest is. One of the things I really need to say is that trespassing on property is illegal. It doesn't matter if you're chasing hornets or not. And in any case, you don't need to go into over every bit of land that a hornet's flying over. If you have permission to, if you've asked permission of a householder or landowner and they give you permission, you can set up a bait station there. If they haven't given you permission or you're unable to ask permission because they're not in, then you'll have to work around that. As I said, we are in any case doing wanting to put up bait station to the side. We're wanting to put up bait stations beyond where we think the nest is. So the fact that we can't move a bait station to somewhere in front of us doesn't matter. We can work around that. And that's really important that we do that. We need to be able to work safely. We need to be able to work alongside the MBU, alongside the members of the public, etc. in this whole process. And we need to all be working to some sort of protocol, which actually I didn't mention, but which we have in our kit boxes, which is a tracking etiquette and protocol, ways of working that we all agree to be working on when we are actually an Asian Hornet team member. Just said that. So this is a track that I did in Jersey, and I thought it might be useful just to talk through that to give you an idea about how it might work. It probably doesn't make much sense at the moment. So we start up here, this first yellow pin. So this was, I went there because there was a report from a landowner, a householder, that they had seen some Asian hornets. They'd taken photos and it had been confirmed 2 weeks before, but everyone was so busy, so no one had got out there yet. So we went out and the householder said, we haven't seen any for 2 weeks, I think they've all gone away now. So we just said, well, would it be okay if we put a bait station, so that's one of these open ones, on your wall? They had a wall at the bottom of their garden. And we left our phone numbers and off we went. And they said they'd ring us if they saw anything. Well, within an hour, they'd rung us. So there were lots of hornets on the bait station. And so we headed back the next day and had a look. And so the first thing we did was to mark some hornets. And we found that we had hornets going off in all sorts of directions. We had them going north, south, and east, all over. So we had to choose one direction to work with. In fact, there were hornet nests found in other places, but you can only do one at a time. So you just choose one direction to work with, and we chose to work on this route that we were on. So what we did was we actually moved our original bait station out into the field to give us clearer sight lines, because there was a bit of a curve in the hedge, and set up our bait station, our first proper bait station for this track, really. Interestingly, 2 of the hornets that we marked on that bait station fainted, a bit like some of the queens faint. They did come round, but they never really quite the same afterwards. Others, it didn't happen anywhere else to any other hornet, so that was a bit odd. Okay, so we started tracking, and you can see here this pink line was from that first one, was heading, we had both the hornets heading down in this direction. So I was working with a colleague, and so we were working together, and we then quite quickly got permission to go into this field here. So there was a road in the way, so we crossed the road, got into the field where we had a much better sight lines further on. And these bright green lines were from that second bait station, and you can see that the hornets were heading over this line of trees. And this was a double avenue of trees surrounding this piece of land. And in fact, the hornets, we later found out, were using this avenue as a sort of flyway. So we ideally wanted to get into this piece of land if we could. And so we had to walk all the way around the whole thing. And eventually we did get permission, and they allowed us to set up a bait station here by the pond. And once we did that, we had one that was heading consistently off there, but we discovered was then using this as a flyway. But what we started doing, and this is the orange line, we found them heading in this direction. We set up another bait station, this is that triangulation that I'm talking about, to the side in a suitable venue here. And we saw the flight paths from that one heading this way. And so you can see already we're getting a bit of a place where things might be intersecting over this way. We also set up a bait station well beyond where we thought the nest might be. And as we expected, we then got hornets heading back in that direction. So now we've got 3 different lines coming and centering all around here. So we came out of this piece of land and we went to the entrance here where there was a bit of a lay-by and something to put our bait stations on. And what we discovered there was that the hornets were flying this way. So now we had 4 intersecting lines heading in this direction. And in fact, using binoculars, we could see the hornets flying from this bait station over the roof of a house that was here. And it had a roof that had a sort of V, and they were going through. And then they were heading down, we thought, into this field or somewhere around this area where all these lines were converging. So we went into this this field here, and there were loads of hornets in that field. They were flying in all directions, and we thought we identified which tree it might be in just from the flight paths, from visually from the outside. But at one point there were 8 of us looking into this tree, and we just couldn't spot it. In fact, it was in that tree, but that wasn't, we didn't find that out till the next day. So we had set up a couple of bait stations here and weren't getting any hornets to them, none, even though we could see hornets flying over our heads. In fact, we later found out it was because we were extremely close to the nest. We didn't know that at the time. And so Bob Hogg, who one of the very, very experienced trackers who developed this method of tracking in Jersey, was there, and he got a camping stove out and boiled some Sutera up, which made this huge plume of scent. And that actually brought hornets down into the bait station so they could be marked. And what we discovered, because they seemed to be flying off in different directions and not where we expected them to be flying up into that tree. And in fact, they were flying. And what we discovered was they were flying all the way down south, following the line of the hedge, and then doing a gradual ascent up into the tree, which is where the nest was. And that nest was about 700 meters from the first sighting in that household. So towards the edge of their range, their foraging range. This was done on Google Earth, and so each of the pin would have detailed information like this. So everything from when we set it up, the marking colors, any particular notes, timings, direction, etc., etc. And that meant that because it was all recorded digitally, we could literally hand it over to other people, which is what we had to do. So if we're looking at the actual nest itself, it was found in this larger tree here. And if you get closer to it, it's still incredibly difficult to find the nest, even if you know it's in there. Even then, you can just about see it, but it's pretty tricky. But when we get closer, we can see it. But they are very, very difficult. And binoculars that we talked about having in your kit are really, really useful to be able to spot nests. But sometimes you need to wait for the wind to blow leaves in a different direction. As I said, this is definitely the book that I would recommend. This is another one that Steve Martin wrote, which is about Asian hornets in general. But I'm going to leave it there. I've done lots of talking. I hope it's been really helpful and I hope it's been interesting. That's my phone number. That's my email address. And I'm not sure where, but I did have the Somerset Beekeepers address there as well. So if you go to the Somerset Beekeepers Association website and look for resources, you should find all the resources for the Asian hornets, the banners, the posters, the stickers, all of it. And you're really welcome to use those. There's no point reinventing the wheel. If you like the material, then do use it, but please acknowledge us, but put your own logo on it. I'm going to leave it there. Good luck with setting up your teams. Good luck with any hornet hunting you end up doing. And I do hope your bees survive having to live with hornets if that's what we end up having to do. Thanks. Bye.